Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to the second edition of our Road Safety Capacity Building Program. But before we start this webinar, Mark, can I please ask you to bring up the Russian interpretation slide? So for our colleagues that are joining us and speaks Russian, there is Russian interpretation available. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can click on the interpretation button and select Russian, and you'll be able to hear our amazing translators translate to your language for you. So if we move to the next slide then, Mark. So once again, a very warm welcome to everyone for joining the Road Safety Capacity Building Program Webinar Series 2. So this has been brought to you by the Asia Pacific Road Safety Observatory, the APRSO, the Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation, the CAREC program, and the Asian Development Bank. So the grant funding for this webinar series was received from the Japan Fund for Prosperous and Resilient Asia and the Pacific, financed by the government of Japan through the Asian Development Bank. So once again, a very warm welcome to everyone. My name is Jessica Trung. I'm your moderator for today, and I'm from Lersninger, an organization that specializes in Vision Zero planning. So for those of you that have joined us after finishing webinar series 1, we're very glad that you're back to, join us for the second edition. And for those of you that are new to this series, we're very glad that you're taking the time to come and participate. So after the conclusion of series 1, this is the second edition. And in this series, we'll be focusing on safe and sustainable transport. And you'll hear very shortly from Pretty from the ADB, who will explain a little bit more about the focus of this series. So similar to webinar series 1, this webinar series has been designed to help engage all our stakeholders, to help build capacity and build an understanding on how to effectively apply road safety interventions to achieve safe and sustainable transport. So we also hope that this webinar series will be an opportunity for us to be able to bring together different global experts and share expertise from around the world. And hopefully that will be able to be applied directly in your work to help enhance your road safety policy and investment options. So this first session of the second edition of our webinar series will be focusing on safer walking and cycling in cities to coincide with the theme of the 8th UN Global Road Safety Week, which began yesterday, as many of you would know. So as you can see on our screen for this very first session, we've got a great lineup of female speakers that I'm very happy to see that we've got an all-female panel today. And we're joined by Bronwyn Thornton, who is the CEO of Walk 21. We've got Pretty, who's from the Asian Development Bank, and also Monica from IRAP. So you'll be able to hear from each of these wonderful speakers in turn in just a bit. And then there will also be a question and answer session at the end. So we hope you enjoy this webinar series. And you can see at the bottom of your screen that there is a Q&A button where you can ask questions throughout the webinar, and we would encourage you to do that throughout. So if we go to the slide on series 2, Mark, so you can see that we've got a lineup of 5 different webinars in this webinar series, and we would encourage you to attend them all if you're able to. So for each webinar series, it will take place every second week, and it will focus on a different area of safe and sustainable transport. So if you can, we would definitely encourage you to be able to attend it all. So a couple of small housekeeping things before we delve into the presentations. As usual, your microphones will be muted unless you are invited to speak. And once again, I encourage you to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen to interact with each other and also to interact with our speakers. And of course, during the Q&A session, we would encourage you to ask questions and pose questions to our great panel. And also, if you want to ask a question in person, feel free to raise your hand and you'll be invited to speak. So with that, I would like to pass the floor on to our very first speaker to officially welcome us to this webinar series, Priti, who is from the Asian Development Bank. Over to you, Priti.
Thank you, Jessica, and good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Manila. And I'd like to echo Jessica's welcome to our second part of our Road Safety Capacity Building webinar series. And this series, as Jessica has mentioned, is a collaborative effort between the Asia Pacific Road Safety Observatory, CAREC, or the Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation Program, and the Asian Development Bank. And we're very grateful to the government of Japan through the Japan Fund for Prosperous and Resilient Asia and the Pacific for their support in making this webinar series possible. Next slide. In this second series, as Jessica has mentioned, we are broadening our perspective, placing road safety within the larger context of our global sustainability agenda. We're exploring the critical connections between road safety and active mobility, transport connectivity, climate resilience, the urban environment, and road safety as a key role in facilitating access to education and economic growth. Next slide. Today, we're launching this series in support of the Streets for Life movement, advocating for safer walking and cycling during UN Global Road Safety Week. The statistics are worrisome. Globally, pedestrians and cyclists account for a quarter of all road deaths. In the Asia and the Pacific region, this figure is even higher, with these vulnerable road users representing almost a third of all road fatalities. And it's crucial that we remember that low income households are disproportionately affected because they're more likely to rely on walking and cycling for essential trips like commuting to work. Next slide. The Global Road Safety Week challenges us to revisit a fundamental question: who's more important when we design the roads and public spaces? Research has consistently shown that when we prioritize pedestrians and people with disabilities, children, the elderly, cyclists, the outcomes are better roads for everyone. For example, intersections where there are cyclists and dedicated cycling infrastructure usually tend to experience a lower incidence of crashes. And these traffic pyramids that you see on your screen, and you can relate to one or the other depending on your context, illustrate the prioritization that we should adopt, starting with walking, cycling, and vulnerable road users, and then thinking about the allocation of space based on volume and movement and so forth. Next slide. When we design for the most vulnerable by prioritizing walking and cycling, our roads tend to transform. We see accessibility consideration, wider footpaths, fewer lanes, lower speeds, better lighting, and people-centered public spaces with seating and shade. And shade is increasingly important because the temperatures are getting hotter and harder in our world. However, a 2023 IRAP study revealed a concerning reality. Only 21% of roads for pedestrians and 23% of roads for cyclists meet the minimum 3-star rating globally. And these essential features are very much lacking in the Asian and the Pacific cities. And this picture that you see on your screen is a project in Chennai, India, which demonstrates how mega street projects in Asia can upgrade road sections to address these critical aspects, which I listed earlier. Next slide. When roads are designed for people, the difference is clear. We see a significant allocation of space and safe infrastructure dedicated to people. We should also recognize that how we design and build and reclaim our streets directly reflect how we value each road user. And the evidence is compelling enough. Studies show that as more people walk and cycle, generally the likelihood of being struck by a vehicle decreases, making streets safer overall. And this picture is a transformation project in Seoul, South Korea, where street space is being reclaimed for pedestrians and walking infrastructure. And it's a good example of this principle in action. Next slide. Our support for Streets for Life movement extends beyond simply reducing road fatalities. The evidence is overwhelming. Shifting investments toward walking and cycling yields significant co-benefits. It improves public health, reduces environmental impact, enhances sustainability, and brings economic advantages, contributing to achieving many of our SDGs. Results from a 2021 ITDP study, which you see on the screen, show that a modest increase in cycling worldwide from 7% to just 23% could save society an estimated $25 trillion over 35 years, while also significantly cutting CO2 emissions. And at the individual level, it also costs less. Owning and using a bicycle costs 90% less than owning a motor vehicle, and more than 90% of trips in cities, which is majority of trips in cities, at 5 kilometers, can be made by a bicycle within 10 minutes of a car. So we don't lose very much time or efficiency. Next slide. Designing and building our roads for people also delivers substantial health and economic returns. For example, in Patna, India, it was found that increased physical activity resulting from just 15% increase in cycling mode share is estimated to save 755 lives per year, translating to $166 million annually in healthcare savings. In the transport sector, investing in cycling lanes and infrastructure offers significant cost savings as well in road construction and maintenance compared to roads designed for cars. Furthermore, a US study revealed that every $1 million spent on cycling lanes creates 34 jobs compared to just 8 jobs created by the same amount, 1 million spent on roads. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, over the past decade, many Asian cities and communities have missed out on the numerous benefits of increased investments in cycling and walking. The consequences are clear. Pedestrian road deaths have increased by 42% in Southeast Asia over the last decade, and cyclist road deaths have increased by 88% in the Western Pacific. So we must reverse this trend. Next slide. There are numerous examples and road maps available to guide us in designing and reclaiming our streets for the well-being of people in Asia and the Pacific, including those we'll be highlighting today. The journey towards Streets for Life begins, again, with the fundamental shift in our thinking. Who's more important? Speaking to the roadmap you see on the slide, first, we must ensure that pedestrians and cyclists are at the heart of our mobility policies from the outset. And this means integrating walking and cycling into our overall mobility ecosystem, reclaiming existing spaces to prioritize these groups, demonstrating the benefits through quick win pilot projects. And we saw many of these during COVID times. And we need to engage community, incentivize and guide private developers to integrate pedestrian and cycling friendly measures, and encourage people-friendly enforcement measures like speed limits under 30 kilometers an hour, which we know saves lives. So I'm confident that our other speakers today will provide further examples and insights into pathways for achieving more walkable and cyclable cities. Next slide. At the ADB, safer walking and cycling is a key strategic priority under our goal to promote low and zero emission transport. Many of our infrastructure projects already incorporate walking and cycling infrastructure, but there is always an opportunity to do more. So we encourage governments to request increased focus on walking and cycling through support from the ADB, both in terms of infrastructure and policy support. Next slide. The ADB produces, we at the ADB produce a range of knowledge products, guides, and toolkits that can inform adoption of good practices. And the Asian Pacific Road Safety Observatory, which is hosted at the ADB, also collates knowledge resources from across the region with a specific focus on vulnerable road users, walking and cycling. So make sure you visit our website. Next slide. Following this initial session, we will continue to explore a range of critical topics relating to safe and sustainable transport in the urban environments, and we encourage you to attend each session and use the opportunity to engage with each other, connect, and see how we can adapt best practices approaches in your city. Next slide. So thank you for your time. We hope you enjoy the series, and happy Global Road Safety Week.
Thank you so much for that, Pretty. That was an excellent overview for why we are focusing on safe and sustainable transport for the second edition of the webinar series. And it's also provided a good overview of why the UN Road Safety Week theme this week is focusing on safe walking and cycling. So with that, Mark, if you can bring up the next slide, I would love to hear from the audience, given that we are in the UN Global Week this week. I would love to hear from you. If you can just put your answer into the Q&A box or in the chat, what activities and actions are you doing as a part of the 8th UN Global Road Safety Week? If you're hosting webinars or you've committed to actions, please feel free to put it into the chat or the Q&A box, and we would love to hear what you're doing as a part of this week. So while you're doing that, please allow me to introduce you to our very next speaker. We're very grateful to have Bronwyn here from Walk 21 to share her experience on how to create healthy and sustainable communities through walking and cycling. Thank you very much, Bronwyn. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Jessica, and thanks for the opportunity to join you today to talk about something that's very close to my heart. We talk about healthy and sustainable, but also that they have to be safe. If we can bring up my first slide, please. Great. So I'm the Chief Exec. Thanks. I'm the Chief Exec of the Walk 21 Foundation. Next slide. And in case you don't know us, we run a series of projects and programs to increase the knowledge and professional understanding of walking. We advocate and campaign for walking into the global agenda, and we look to build capacity and training programs to upskill people to deliver for the walking for everybody. The whole population walks in some capacity, and we're here for them. Next slide. The flagship event that people know us for is our conference every year. We've been hosted in Hong Kong and Seoul in the past, and we've worked quite a small amount in Asia, and this year we're going to be in Tirana, Albania. So if you want to come and meet a bunch of very passionate people and learn a lot more about walking, then you're very welcome to join us there. Next slide, please. I want to just talk about why walking and cycling. I'll mention briefly cycling as well, because we work with the Partnership for Active Travel and Health across both of those active mobility agendas, albeit in Walk 21, we do focus on walking to give it the priority and the focus that it deserves. As you saw in Pretty's priority pyramids, for us, walking is always at the top. It's who we are as human beings. It's how we move around our cities. And it does help to deliver on more sustainable development goals than any other mode of transport. And many people think we're limited to sustainable cities and communities or local issues. But when you see this list of the goals and you see that walking is part of those, even though it never gets a mention, we're part of that large agenda to deliver on all those elements that you've heard from Pretty as well, and you'll continue to hear. Next slide.
Bronwyn, can I just ask you to speak a little bit slower for our translators, please?
Oh, yes, of course. Sorry, thank you, Jess. Essential to do that. Okay. So as I said, at Walk 21, we put walking first. We start with people on foot. And what does that mean in terms of how do we build our walkable cities? So from SDG 11.2, that means SDG 11.2 is looking for the percentage of people within 500 meters of public transport. And that 500 meters, we think, applies to all the destinations and places where people are walking the most. So very often with cycling, they talk about networks, bike lanes and networks. For walking, we talk about neighborhoods and proximity to the destinations that people want to reach. So we take the concept of SDG 11.2 and translate that to making it possible for people to walk to school, to work, to retail areas, to sport and leisure amenities, and the critical connection to public transport, which enables longer journeys than you can do within a reasonable amount of time on foot. Next slide, please. I'm going to focus a little bit on the safety, and you've heard some of this already from Pretty, but let me highlight some of the critical issues. And at Walk 21 and through PATH, we are focusing at the governance policy level, the upstream moment, to try and change the systems that deliver the change on our streets. And shockingly, the road crashes remain the leading cause of death for children and young people. And pedestrians represent 23% of those road crash fatalities. If you think about what the volume of pedestrians walking in some regions of the world, this rate varies quite dramatically, and pedestrian deaths are rising. Cyclist deaths are also increasing. You've heard already about the increase in pedestrian deaths in Southeast Asia. But even across Europe, cycling deaths have increased by 50%. So we're not there yet by a long shot. And Africa, where the most people walk, pedestrians represent 33% of facilities. Next slide. And unsurprisingly, children are not happy about this. Parents are not happy about this. Adults are not happy about this. And we wanted to seek to address how to improve the walkability in our communities, not just for road safety, but for all of the benefits that comes around social cohesion, health, community connections, fiscal viability of public transport systems, and local economies. So these children are in Medellin, Colombia, and we went out with them with these lollipops because we had developed an app to measure the walkability of their neighborhoods, and they wanted to campaign for improved walking conditions so they could simply walk to school. Because it's a rough neighborhood, we use these lollipops to identify where they're happy, where they're unsafe, and where those improvements could happen. Next slide, please. And it's shocking to me, these are some pictures, this footpath, this minimum piece of infrastructure resulted from the opportunity to actually express to the local authorities what those children needed in that space. And the Walkability app has continued to be our tool for uplifting community need from the streets into the conversation at council levels and trying to seek to change the investment models and the policies to deliver for everybody walking. That simple provision of a footpath transformed those children's journey to school and the overall safety and comfort of that area for people walking. Which brings me to my second point in the framework of perspectives on safety and the policy interventions is, for the next slide, is the places. So we understand what's happening for people around the world. Next slide, please. Thanks. And you've heard a little bit from Priti. She had a percentage. I've got 4 out of 5 places where people routinely walk or cycle are not safe, and especially in low and middle income countries. Next slide, please. So many streets do not provide those simple basic provision of space for people to walk. And you could argue here, well, this is a narrow street, the cars are moving very slowly, and that may well be true. But we have so many demands on the space here. We have vendors, we have children, we have movement of people. But this does not provide a protected, safe environment for these children to move comfortably and safely. And the statistics clearly demonstrate that we have to improve street level, make those street level changes. And you've heard from Priti, and you'll hear from Monica and see some more pictures about this as well. And the priority that we've given for allocating public space to parking private vehicles is one of those paradigm shifts that we are going to have to continue to question, even when we're addressing road safety as part of building resilient, comfortable, healthy communities. Next slide, please. And one of those fundamental shifts that I wanted to challenge the conversation about road safety with is the need to actually see public transport as a road safety solution. It clearly demonstrates, the statistics clearly demonstrate that in public transport ridership is higher, road traffic fatalities are lower. So less people die using public transport than using our roads. We must invest in public transport, not just for all the environmental and efficiency and cost-effective benefits of it, but invest in it for road safety as well. And walking is integral to that. Integrating walking and public transport delivers a door-to-door, highly functional, highly safe, highly comfortable, can be highly comfortable transport system for people, especially in the megacities of Asia. And the other important thing about this, if you want to get reductions in motorization or the impact on cars. I'm not putting the graph up here, but you can find it in the report. You can see on that screen is that you have to combine improvements to walking and cycling access to public transport, as well as the public transport service, to develop this ecosystem shift that we need and to support the ridership of public transport. You can't get it just by investing in public transport. We must invest in those catchments as well. So next slide, please. The tragedy that delivers some of this tragedy on the streets is that only 15% of national policies have commitments to safer walking and cycling. 15%. And yet it's so fundamental to inviting people to walk and cycle in their communities. And this is why we are working upstream at the policy level to support governments to review those policies, invest in those decisions, and to deliver that change on the street. So if you go to the next slide, please. So we've been working across Africa. We did an extensive report looking at walking and cycling in Africa with the UN Environment and UN Habitat. And that has led over the last couple of years to a whole continent Pan-African action plan for active mobility, which is all about national governments investing and supporting the delivery of walking and cycling on the streets of the cities and towns of Africa. We've also been working across the Pan-European region through the PEP partnership, building that master plan, building that policy expectation that walking and cycling is a fundamental and valuable investment for national governments to enable their local delivery. I understand about all the layers of government and who's responsible, but we must bring the agenda to national governments to liberate the funding, to seek it out from the multilateral development banks, and deliver that change on street. We've just started a project in the Latin American region to do a similar process with uplifting the expectation around walking and cycling to deliver that change there as well. So I've talked quite a lot around the policy agenda because it's at all of the levels that we have to work. We have to work at the national government level, at the global level, at the regional level, and we have to deliver this through our cities and towns and onto the streets where people live and where children go to school every day. And it's this whole ecosystem shift that we have to imagine, where we're shifting to a safer system with public transport, walking and cycling catchments, as well as building all of the road safety interventions into the streetscape, which you saw from Priti Patel, and I'm sure you will hear from Monica as well. So it's the full package that we have to do to reap the benefits of walking and cycling. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity today and for the Road Safety Week to just focus for at least this week, what can we do in our capacity and in all our different roles to uplift walking and cycling and the value they have to make a change on the streets that we need in all of our communities. So with the last slide, thank you very much. And I look forward to any questions. Sorry, this is the resource. This is the path, the Partnership for Active Travel and Health's road safety call. And this is the policy framework for people to take to your authorities, take to your workplaces, and look at where you can make those changes. Thanks very much. And there is one last thank you slide after this. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive overview, Bronwyn. I think you've made a very good case for why walking should be such a big part of our safer and more sustainable agenda for our transport networks. But I guess, as you've also said, there's still a lot of work for us to do in order to make that mode of transport as safe as it can be. And we are still a very long way from that. And you'll be pleased to know our audience here have also put into our Q&A box what they're actually doing to highlight the importance of walking and cycling as a part of the UN Global Road Safety Week. So we've got things from marathons to conferences to pledges that's happening. But also, very importantly, there's a lot of ongoing work that is not just done as a part of the UN week, which is also very important to ensure sustainability of our programs over time. So thank you for those that have participated and put your comments. Feel free to continue doing that as we progress with the webinar. But as Bronwyn sort of mentioned, we are still a very long way away from actually having a safe transport network to facilitate safer walking and cycling. So with that, it will be interesting for us to have an understanding of how safe you feel walking and cycling in your city. So Mark, if you can please bring up the second poll question for our audience. If you can fill in this poll and let us know, do you feel safe walking and cycling in your city? That would be very much appreciated. So next, I would like to introduce Monica from IRAP, who will talk a bit about how do we design our cities to make it safer for our cyclists and pedestrians. So Monica, over to you.
Thank you, Jess. And thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I'm just going to share my slides.
I can see it coming on.
Okay. I think because the poll is still here, I can't. Hang on. Oh no, hang on. They've gone right to the end. Sorry. I'll just reverse them all and then we'll get started. Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Well, it's nice to be here, everyone. I'm joining you today from the Netherlands, which is in a small country in Europe and very well known for its cycling. But actually, I've spent a lot of my career in the Asia Pacific region and in China and working throughout the Asian countries. And so I would like to bring that perspective today because I think it's a really interesting one, having experienced cycling and walking in many parts of the world. And often in Beijing and in Guangzhou, bicycling was my main mode of transport, not just for me, but also for my children. And it's an incredibly important thing, I think, as a parent, for your children to be able to participate and safely in a transport system. Coming from Australia, often the only option for transport is by car, which actually means that young people are not able to get themselves to and from places in a safe way unless a parent is driving them, which creates a lot of burden on a family, actually, even an economic burden in a high-income country. And if this model is then used in other countries where incomes are not so high and car ownership is that much harder to achieve, it comes to a real disadvantage of many people. Not just that, it's not healthy and it's not sustainable. So we have our Sustainable Development Goals. The ones that we focus on here at IRAP is Global Development Goal 3. And related to that, it's to halve road deaths and serious injuries by 2030. We know the road death and injury toll is unacceptably high. I think almost everyone globally, whenever I present, and if I ever ask this question, have you or a close family member been affected in some way by a road crash? Almost everybody says yes. They've either lost friends or people they know have been severely injured. And this, across history, so many wonderful people in the world are lost through this issue. And it does need to change. And we really do need to seriously reconsider how we go about creating our transport systems, which everyone interacts with. So the proportion of vulnerable road user crashes is very, very high. And you can see from these charts how big, for example, in India, the proportion of fatalities from pedestrians and bicyclists and motorized two-wheelers is in the overall toll. This is not just a problem of car crashes. This is people who are trying to walk places, sometimes to public transport, trying to get themselves from A to B and ending up in a really serious crash. In the Netherlands here, bicycle crashes make up the largest proportion of fatal and serious crashes. So it's not a unique problem to Asia. This is a global problem that we've got to address better. But what often happens is that cycling and walking infrastructure is the forgotten cousin of building roads. It simply is not thought about, or it's deliberately ignored. And it's ignored at the investment level, it's ignored at the governance level, it's ignored at the design level, and it's ignored at the construction level. And so what we end up with is a system that prioritizes fast and large vehicles over people trying to cross roads or walk along roads or cycle somewhere. So what IRAP does is it provides methods and models to measure road infrastructure risk. And so it's a proactive approach. We don't wait for the crashes to happen and for the deaths and serious injuries to occur before something can be done about it and before the problem is identified. And so what our tools enable you to do is then estimate future rates of fatal and serious crashes and propose the safety solutions to reduce the likelihood and severity of these crashes. Crashes will always happen. There's lots of humans involved in operating vehicles and going places. People have different levels of ability and perception. We have an increasing number of automated vehicles, which, contrary to earlier hopes, actually often make the problem worse. And the interactivity between these automated vehicles and humans becomes even more problematic and complex. So what we want to do ideally is reduce the severe outcomes of crashes when they do occur. Early in my career, I started in aviation safety. And in aviation safety, they have a genuine vision zero approach. No one can afford to have aeroplanes falling out of the sky. And what you can't do for aviation is control the severity. If a plane falls out of the sky, the chances are everyone will die. And so you must control for the likelihood. It's basic risk management that we manage the likelihood and the consequence. And we need to do that in road safety. So there's a lot more we can be doing to reduce the likelihood of crashes. There's also a lot more we can do to reduce the severity of crashes. So all of IRAP's tools are based on global research. We have 11 centers of excellence around the world, and we base all of our models on that research that's done. The applications that we have are designed to support objectives at the national road safety level, but right down to cities. We want to support good policy making and investment decisions and prioritization. We want to improve designs before the roads are built, and we want to track safety performance over time. So here's an example of some of the tools that we have. Our best known tools are called star ratings, and that's where we collect data from the road itself, as well as the speed of vehicles and the different road user flows. And we can map this risk. So the first box you can see there with the black, red, and yellow colors is a star rating map. So 1 star is for the least safe road, 5 stars is for the most safe road. And then this can be mapped across a road, and you can then address the risks where the crash risk is highest. We have a pedestrian star rating, which powers our star rating for schools tool. So you can see there in the second box at the top, the star rating for schools data. And because we collect a lot of data from around the world, it can give us some really good indication of trends across the world. We also have a tool that is focused on cycling and light mobility called CycleWrap. And one of the key reasons we had this is because increasingly there are some great cycling facilities being built around the world, both on-road and off-road. Sometimes it's shared paths that's shared with pedestrians. Sometimes these are completely off-road paths. And it really became quite apparent that we need better tools to evaluate the condition of these paths, not just that they exist, but they're fit for purpose. In a lot of Asian cities, there are a lot of bikes and e-bikes and delivery vehicles using this infrastructure. So it's really important, just like with the road system, that infrastructure meets the need and is safe. What we can then do is, in that bottom chart, you can see with the bar graph, we can identify where the risks are highest along a length of road by the different crash types. So this helps engineers look at the design that they have and then understand where the points are down to the 100-meter level of where safety measures need to be targeted. So you can see in that example from Vietnam at the bottom, in the very last segment of that road, there's a very high risk, and that pink bar is the risk at the intersection itself. So it suggests that you can then go and have a look at that intersection and redesign it to reduce the risk of collisions at the intersections. Our Star Rating for Schools tool is available in an app, so that's what you can see there on the iPhone being used, pardon me. And then in the last one is we provide star rating certification to verify that a road has been assessed and that it meets a minimum 3-star standard. So our tools have been used in over 132 countries, and I really always reiterate, it's important when we talk about road safety in any context that we do so from a safe system approach. And this is really important that all these 5 elements are addressed, but there's also interrelationships. And so while IRAP focuses on the infrastructure safety, that does actually feed into the sorts of vehicles. We do a lot of research around the increased systems in vehicles that allow for automated driver support systems and speed control. There's
Monica,
also, yes?
a couple of minutes left.
Yeah, okay. It's also important for prompting good behavior, particularly with speed and emergency response. So this is just a quick snapshot of our data. Priti mentioned this earlier, that from all the data that is collected through our systems, we can see general KPIs for across the world. And we can see here that the situation for bicycles and pedestrians is quite poor. It's poor everywhere. This is taken locally. These photos are taken locally where I live in the Netherlands, which goes to show, as I said earlier, it's not a problem unique to any region in the world. Pedestrians really are often forgotten. So in terms of what a 5-star street looks like, there are lots of very good resources. This one is from the Global Designing Cities Initiative and their Global Street Design Guide, which we released a star rating of a few years ago. And here are just some examples. I'll go through them very quickly of projects that we've done around the world. This first one was in Tianjin in China and a street redesign a few years back. And there's some really nice examples of where walking and cycling infrastructure has been implemented, and we can see a really clear difference in the star ratings. This example from Ghana was from Accra in Ghana was an intersection redesign, which really improved the safety for people walking across that intersection, and was accompanied with big speed reductions. And our star rating for schools tool, which enables school communities themselves to assess the safety of the streets around, which is now supported by a youth engagement app, which is an app that young people can use to tell the school and the municipality and road authorities where they don't feel safe. And this is a quick snapshot of one of our projects in Vietnam, which has used this youth engagement app on a really large level and has resulted in a lot of road upgrades, safety upgrades surrounding schools. Our Cycle Wrap tool, as I mentioned earlier, is one that's focused on cycling and light mobility and has lots of different applications to help road authorities and others make better decisions on how to design safe infrastructure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Monica. That's great to see all the great work that IRAP is doing around the world. And I'm especially interested in Cycle Wrap. That is quite different and something that we haven't seen a lot of. So that looks like it's a very useful application for a lot of governments to help them design safer bike paths and safer routes for cycling. Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you so much for that again, Monica. And let's bring all our speakers back. If I can invite Priti and Bronwyn to come back and join us for the Q&A session. So once again, if you've got any questions that you would like to raise and pose to the panel, please feel free to put it either in the chat or the Q&A box. But before we jump into the Q&A session, I just want to ask Mark, can you please bring up the results of the poll question from the second one? So the question was, how many people feel safe walking or cycling in their city? And the majority, over 50%, actually 60% of people do not feel safe walking or cycling, which it's a very sad reality for a lot of people living in cities around the world. And only about 12% actually confidently said that they're feeling safe. So that's something for our panelists to ponder as we sort of talk about how do we actually make people feel safe walking and cycling, especially when we see it as such an important part of sustainable transport. And I might ask Pretty first, one of the things that struck me in your presentation was when you said shade is such an important feature in actually encouraging people to walk, especially in countries where there is a hot climate. That's often not something that people consider when they talk about encouraging people to walk or encouraging safe walking. So do you find that those kind of elements are a really important part of actually encouraging more active mobility?
Yes, definitely. I mean, in the health sector, heat stress is a huge concern even when kids are going to school and in classrooms and in walking. Also, when we look at walkability, looking at how much shade there is and so forth is starting to become a huge factor that we look at in terms of what is walkable and what is pedestrian friendly and people friendly. I myself, right now in Manila, it's really, really hot, 35 degrees. If I walk to the metro 15 minutes, I'm drenched in sweat. So as much as I'm a very active person, how do I manage that myself when I'm walking on a street with no shade, and going to work quite, yeah, sweaty. So it is a growing concern, both, I guess, in how we design our streets, but also in terms of health issues as well that people are concerned with.
Yeah, and it is an important consideration where, I think, Monica, it was your stat that was talking about 90% of casualties in low middle income countries are actually pedestrians and cyclists. And many of those countries are in hotter climates like Southeast Asia and Africa. So those elements are important considerations that we may not be aware of that should also be taken into consideration when building those facilities. And maybe I'll ask Bronwyn next. Thank you for that great presentation again. And I love the motto, I guess, of Walk 21 about putting walking first. And it's got so many different co-benefits. I guess the question that comes to mind is around what about people that do have mobility issues? How do we factor them in that active mobility sort of planning?
Right. Thanks, Jess. It's a perfect segue. Let me make a really good little point first, and then I really want to talk about that. As much as we are talking about walking and cycling in this webinar and all week about the importance of their safety and the health and the value that they bring to our communities is very much a shared agenda that they both do. They are different modes. They have different needs, different road safety outcomes. And so to use the question, like, do you feel safe walking or cycling in your city? We have to split those modes out to ask these sort of questions, because you can feel completely unsafe cycling because there's no lanes, but safe walking because there's footpaths and crossings. The infrastructure provision is very different. The capacity of those modes to move around the city are very different. The demand on space from our prioritized cars is very different. And it's really valuable to talk about them within the active mobility agenda and uplift both of them. But we must always remember their differences and their different needs. And this is where the answer to your question comes, which is people with mobility challenges benefit enormously from improved walking and cycling facilities. So those people who need mobility aids, we need to design, just as we design for children and old people for the spectrum, walkable environments that enable movement of people with mobility challenges are part of the agenda. When we talk about walking, we include people with mobility devices, whether that's a simple walking stick or whether it's a wheelchair. But it's also that spectrum of light mobility, the climate agenda around bringing in scooters. And I know we can talk about the road safety of e-mobility, of micro scooters, but the provision of these of spaces where people can move independently, either with their mobility aids, that's a walkable and a cyclable space. The road danger that we are addressing comes from the heavier motorized vehicles. That's the danger that we have to reduce and remove from the context so people can move more freely, whatever their mobility needs are. And we can provide for that with ramps, with continuous pavement levels. We can accommodate all of that. But the first thing we have to do is liberate that space and enable it to be a safe environment where children can walk erratically. One of the reasons, you know, when you think about providing footpaths for children to walk to school, creating a buffer zone, a strip of nature with some trees, not only provides shade, but it provides a little bit of buffer zone. So if children are talking, they don't have to be just moving like a car and paying attention only to this sort of forwards and backwards movement. And that's what liberates that sort of infrastructure. We saw it in a picture, I think, Pretty, you had that curb build out for the walking and things. We just create more space for people to be human rather than to move like robots through our public space. And so that it's fundamental that a walkable environment is accessible for people with mobility devices. And that is a separate space from the higher speed movement of bicycles and light mobility. But it's all part of the mix of a safer, more accessible, more human-centered urban space.
Fantastic.
Actually, I've just
Thanks.
got one last quick comment to make. If you also start with people and you talk about that space, we did a project in Dublin, and building public space actually was a transport efficiency solution as well. More people could move through the junction as a plaza than could have done with a street system. So there's very good transport deliverables around congestion and efficiency that come from this. It's not just the co-benefits or the social benefits or the health benefits, but it delivers for transport as well.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Very comprehensive answer. Thank you for that. Monica, I think in your presentation, you touched on the fact that, you know, building so works for sustainable walking and cycling is being deliberately ignored at every level. So I think we've got a
Not necessarily deliberately. I think what happens is it gets neglected, and it gets neglected in the way that roads are financed and planned, and sometimes in the expertise of the teams doing this, and even sometimes in the objectives that we need a more efficient network. We've got congestion at unacceptable levels, so therefore there's a solution posed to a problem. And I really liked Bronwyn's last point, and in fact I'd like to just elaborate on it a little, because it becomes a level of service issue. If you plan your urban road network only for vehicles, that means that every school trip, every trip, I mean, Pretty, you would know this from Manila, even a 2-kilometer trip often has to be done by car. Everybody sits in traffic. There's no alternative. There's nobody who would say, actually, what I would like to prioritize is my time or the reliability of my trip or my health or any other choice over that. To walk or to cycle is simply not possible because the entire space is taken up by cars. So by trying to provide this level of service for this particular mode, it comes at the expense not just of every other mode, but of that mode itself. So it's completely inefficient. And we know this from the data that even in a place like Australia, how many trips, and it's huge, that are done by car that are under 2 kilometers or under 5 kilometers. And these are trips that could very easily be done walking or cycling. And it's so important that we free up that space and make our cities' road networks more efficient by really genuinely providing safe alternatives. And safety is the key here. People are not going to opt for the alternative if it's not safe. Then also not going to opt for it if it's not comfortable. And those two things often go hand in hand.
Great. Thanks for that, Monica. There's a lot of, I guess, comments in the chat around things that people have tried in their country and it's failed. And I think people are asking, well, how best can we support these activities in our country? How can we advocate for our governments to do better with safer walking and safer cycling? How do we encourage them to build a better public, transport network? So maybe a quick 30 to 40-second answer from each of our speakers on what you see as some of the key priority actions that people can do to facilitate some of those things that I just mentioned. I'll start with you, Pretty.
Sure, I would say two things: advocating for walking, cycling, public transportation, and in urban plans, development plans, and so forth. I think doing that level of policy work so that, you know, when there is investments, sorry, it's not 60 seconds, but investments in from development banks or government, that there is already a plan there, and then it's easy to get support that way. The second piece is that, you know, that pilot project, you know, quick wins and demonstrating that it works. You know, if you can get some sort of supporter to do a pilot, you know, in a certain road sector that shows the benefits, I think that can also help at a practical level. So I would say those two things might be a good way to go.
Thanks, Pretty. Bronwyn, a quick and short answer.
Pretty, that was perfect. What she said, but also that that prioritization, like capture the broader benefits of these investments, so that you can bring the case for future, evaluate your projects and bring the case for future investment.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bronwyn. And lastly, Monica.
I couldn't agree more. I think the one thing that I really saw as being so effective in China was very clear policies in place to support walking and cycling. And then the pilots, the pop-up pilots that Pretty mentioned, it was a very much trial and error approach. They put something in, they'd observe, they'd adjust if necessary, but eventually and quite quickly, the entire city of Beijing had bicycle facilities on every street and excellent walking facilities. And if Beijing can do it, anyone can do it. It just needs those two things.
Thank you very much, Monica. And with that, I'd like to say a very big thank you to Monica, Bronwyn, and Pretty for their fantastic presentations and insightful comments on how we together as a community can push for safer walking and cycling. So once again, thank you so much for taking the time and being with us here today on this webinar. Thank you. Mark, can I please ask you to bring up the very last poll question? So to everyone on this webinar today, thank you so much for joining us. We would love to hear from you on what you found useful from today's webinar. So if we're going to just ask Mark, if you can, yep, the poll question 3 is on your screen now. If you can just let us know what you found most helpful from today's webinar, that would be helpful with our planning for future sessions. And you can also see on your screen, a lot of people have been asking, how do we access the presentations and the recordings from today? Please go to the APRSO Knowledge Hub, and the web address is up there. So please visit that website and you'll be able to access all the materials there. And then if we move to the next slide, please, Mark. And in 2 weeks' time, we will have another webinar session that focuses on e-mobility and last mile connectivity. So we heard today about the importance of building a public transport network to help move people around. So but how do we get people from the transport station back to where they need to go and the end? So we'll be talking about that and exploring that in the very next session. So we hope you can join us. And with that, once again, a very big thank you to each of our speakers. Thank you to each of our audience that has joined us today. And I wish you a happy UN Global Road Safety Week. And thank you for your time today. Have a great week. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you.